I want to give the floor to Michael Binter, who's joining us today. I'm going to ask Michael to introduce himself, but let me say first of all that he's a really dear friend, not only for myself but also for the 50%. He's the actual co-president of Oikos International, and he's invaluable contributor to youth activism in the world. So, Michael, thank you for lending us your time. Thank you for being here today and preparing this wonderful presentation you're going to share with us.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you so much for those kind words. Welcome, everyone. I want to begin with I am no expert. I want to begin with we are all learners on a journey, and I invite you to learn together with me. I invite you to disturb and disrupt also this session, to ask questions and just unmute. There's no reason to believe that I tell any truth because I might not. And that is because the world is complex and uncertain and ambiguous and vulnerable. And all of that will be part of also this systems thinking. I'm gonna quickly share my screen just to feel a little bit more safe for myself, because that makes it easier. So as Matthias already said, my name is Michael, and I love the fact that we are here part of the Young Person's Guide to Systems Change. I'm very curious about the whole journey that you are going to have over the next few months. For today, hello systems thinkers. I believe all of you already are such system thinkers. My background, or why I'm trained in systems thinking, why I apply this philosophy, is partly because of my study program at the University of Graz in Austria. It's partly because my work at Oikos, where I get involved with leadership skills and inner development goals and stuff like that. But most of it's because of life itself. Most I know about systems is because of daily experience, because of what I can see and observe in the world. And today, you are going to be dancing with systems. It's actually really more a dance than anything else. We will have to leave this linear world where actions have clear outcomes, and we're gonna do a little deep dive into something that is more of a VUCA world, as I already mentioned, like vulnerable, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Before we go there, I know it's different times for all of you, but I want to ask you about your breakfast. And maybe someone even wants to answer my question loud and unmute, because I'm curious, what did you have for breakfast today? Is there anyone who would be willing to share and have a little conversation with me?
I can join.
Stefano, hi.
Yeah. Hi, nice to meet you, first of all.
So, what did you have today?
I had like some bread with some like jam from like a peach, and I decided like I shift my diet also to vegetarian, let's say, mostly. So like vegan, sorry. So I do not drink anymore like the milk like from the cow, let's say, and so I decided to like to pass to choose the one from oat milk, which I really like, by the way. And I think like sometimes we don't change because we don't know, you know. That's also like maybe some
Very good.
yeah. So
That's
yeah,
good
this
for
was my
that's good for
breakfast.
starters. So your breakfast, stay with me. I'm curious, what do you think? How many people were involved in that breakfast? And you can think out loud. So first person I give you, that is you, because you ate it. So
Yeah,
who
of
else
course.
might have been involved in that breakfast?
Okay, first of all, I think like the supply chain who provide me like the bread. So I think like the bakery who is working there, who is supplying the bakery, so like the farmer in some way. And also I think like nature, because we should start to consider it as a stakeholder in some way. And
Sure, like the plants that were growing before you even were able to harvest anything.
yeah, definitely. And what else? And I watch like some news, so also like I don't know, some journalists, let's say. So
Journalists were part of your breakfast too. Nice. That's
yeah,
already
that's
interesting. So we heard about the supply chain, people there, like also the harvesters on the field, the people who planted the plants, and then the ecosystem in itself. That's not a person, but that's also part of your breakfast. Then you talked about a bakery, so there was maybe someone selling you the bread. There was an exchange of money, so the money also came somewhere from, and you can go on and go on and go on, and you might figure this is a big system just for your breakfast to exist. For me, it was also like fruits from the farmer's market, uh, people building up the stalls in the morning, all of that. It's a big system already. I wanted to give you that as a quick example already. Um, from here, giving you the most appropriate definition of systems thinking. It's from Wikipedia, another way of showing what a system can do. Systems thinking is a way of making sense of the complexity of the world by looking at it in terms of wholes and relationships rather than by splitting it down into its parts. So I'm gonna stop here. I think that's pretty much enough. What might that mean? So there's it says like making sense of the complexity of the world. So systems thinking is about trying to understand the world, trying to understand how things run, what kind of things. So it looks at it in terms of wholes, in the sense of holism. So looking at a whole in which is like interconnected parts. You don't look just at a glass that I have in my hand, but rather, oh, there's a glass and it's nested in my hand and I can hold it up inside a glass of water. And so there's an interconnected system already in this piece of glass that I have here. And you look at it in relationships, also considered as flows. So if I continue with the glass, one flow could be, okay, how much water is in there? There's a stock. And if I pour water in, which I actually can do because I also have a bottle of water with a different stock. If I pour water in here, there's a flow between the bottle and the glass. And in systems thinking, we try to understand rather how these flows work than just looking at, okay, this bottle is half full and this glass is a quarter full, and that's it. So far, so good. Some brain teasers here. One of the most important people in systems thinking. I see some people smiling, so you might know Donella Meadows. She could be coined as the founder of this school of thought. Donella Meadows, she wrote, there are so many quotes of Donella Meadows. I picked this one because I think it fits really well with what we have or want to talk about today. She said, there are no separate systems. The world is a continuum. Is again like this holism idea. Where to draw a boundary around a system depends on the purpose of the discussion. So what is the boundary of a system and where do we place it? I want to give you another brain teaser here. I heard that someone, I think Anna, you're from Argentina. So how is my breakfast connected with Argentinian politics? I don't know exactly, but maybe, depending on my mood of today, which is depending on the breakfast I just had, I will give a more interesting or less interesting presentation today. In a few years, or maybe already tomorrow, you're going to have a conversation or be part of Argentinian politics. And because you remember this conversation of today so well, you will either introduce systems thinking into Argentinian politics or not. So my breakfast literally could have an impact on Argentinian politics. Question is, does it make any sense to include that into any discussion about it? Maybe not. But still, my mood could be considered here. or anyone who sparks interest, or the way how an article is written online that might make you want to read it. That could be part of how you look at a system. And so where to place the boundaries, this is really kind of the dancing act already. If you want to learn more about Donella Meadows, I'm going to share a link at the end with a great article, and she has a whole website. Actually, she founded the Donella Meadows Institute that was later renamed into Academy of Systems Thinking or something like that. I would have to look it up, but you will learn more about her. I guess also Matthias was nodding as part of this program here. She also kind of brought up this idea of an iceberg. You all can imagine an iceberg. You also see one here. There's a part of the iceberg that is above the surface and a part of the iceberg that is below the surface. So above the iceberg is what we actually can see. What can we observe in the world? What event? What is happening? Because I believe it makes sense in my context in Europe and in my context of my breakfast of this morning, because I had oats in my granola bowl. One event that might have an influence on that is the war in Ukraine. So there's an event, war in Ukraine, and somehow that has an effect on my breakfast of today. Now, how can that be? What is the connection there? Well, there's a war in Ukraine. That's the event. But there are other things that are underlying, like, oh, Ukraine is actually a great producer of hops and of malts, but also of grain, and one of the green hubs for all these kind of things in Europe and also in the rest of the world. So the war in Ukraine also had an impact on the economies of grain, and that had an impact on the price I had to pay for oats in the supermarket. So the war in Ukraine actually had a quite direct impact on my breakfast. Now, what can we actually observe below the surface? Patterns of behavior is kind of looking at the trends, and I think that is the level where we are here. Trends, like, okay, there's a war that has an impact on the economy, blah, blah, blah. That goes on and on. If we look deeper, let's look at a system structure. How are the parts related and what influences the patterns? Now it already gets a little bit complicated to connect my breakfast on that level clearly with the war in Ukraine. But you can see like system structures in Ukraine and how that interlinks with economy. So if there's a war, then parts of the economy like the weapon industry has a high because there's more demand for that, while because there's less export possible, the price on grain also goes up because Ukraine cannot sell that so much. Okay, so there is this system structures, how they interlink, what systems are involved, the economy and the conflicts. And now if we look even deeper, we can think about mental models. What kind of mental models could we put there? What values are in place? What assumptions, beliefs shape this system? Thinking about economy, we believe for a long time that having a globalized economical system will support us, will be good for everyone. And so one thing that fueled the system and how it is today was this belief that a globalized economy is good for all of us. And now for me today, it's a little bit bad because I had to pay an extra for the oats in my breakfast. That's not too bad. It's all right. I can afford that. But there is an impact coming from the belief system that is really down below here and how that interlinks here. What Donella Meadows also said is if you want to change a system, we so we have different leverages. There's a really low leverage on the event sphere. So just starting another war somewhere else will have an effect on the system, but it doesn't change the system itself. The more we go down under the iceberg, the more leverage we have. So if we change patterns of behavior, that's good. If we're able to change mental models, wow, that would be a big shift. If everyone starts to believe that it's better for your economy if you're able to sustain the nutrition of the people around you with food that is grown around you, that might have a very extreme impact on how our economical system works. Okay, I'm going to leave that here. It's just an input. You can learn more about the iceberg at another point, because I want to get to this huge list and I don't have enough time to go through all of this. So I will share that resource with you as well. But it's a way how we can get started with systems thinking. The first level is, if I want to understand a system, is get the beat. So I don't go into a system disturbing it right away. I want to watch how does this system behave? What is happening there? And even further would be listen to the wisdom of the system, which means like, I believe that there are forces and structures in place that help this system run itself. So I trust the system is built on something that makes some kind of sense. And even if it sounds totally unlogical to us or to me in that moment, there will be a reason for it. And I want to understand that first before I change or try to change to making things better. I really want to understand what's happening there. You can see that a lot of developmental work, like Western people often try to do. They go into some other country and say, I'm going to create jobs here. And then they start an NGO or start a business there, and they don't actually create good jobs for people there, but rather they have a short-term impact. And when they leave, they probably even have destroyed an economy that is local to that place. So let's look at the system, get the beat first, and then listen also to the wisdom of the system that it already has. And then, and that's a hard one, expose your mental models to the open air. Everything, please remember that. Everything everyone knows, including you, is only a model. You don't understand the truth. I don't understand the truth. I just have a perspective on the world, and you also only have that. So I only have functioning mental models that serve me today, but I always want to continue being a learner and challenge those. And I can challenge those by having conversations with other people, by having time today to get critical questions from you about anything that I shared. And I hope you will have some later. Actually, in a few seconds. I'm not going to talk so much longer. And I try to always learn and always question those models. This is very connected with the fourth statement here, stay humble, stay a learner. So if I'm able to consider, oh yeah, I only have mental models, then I'm also able to say, okay, I work with systems, for example, on the computer, in nature, among people, in organizations. And I constantly remind myself of how incomplete my mental models are, how complex the world is, and how much I don't know. So the way I can improve, how I can learn is experiment, is ask questions, is trying to get other people or other standpoints in. Fifth is honor and protect information. Quote from Donella Meadows, I would guess that 99% of what goes wrong in systems goes wrong because of faulty or missing information. Sometimes we cannot do anything about that, but we should really try to figure out what information might be lacking in a system if I want to start understanding it. What do I need to know? And how can I get to that information? Information doesn't have to be only in numbers or something you can hold in your hands. Information can also be, oh, people in this system are happier. They smile all the time. Something is important about them being happy, or other people in a different system are sad all the time, or a certain subgroup in a system is always unhappy or stressed. Why are they stressed all the time? Before asking why, actually, this is information. It's important that I kind of acknowledge that. I jump a little bit because I really like the 10th statement here. And this is about expanding time horizons. If you look at systems, we often, for example, in a political system, politicians are often held to say, yeah, they're only looking at their own legislative, yeah, I cannot speak anymore. They're only looking at their own time in office. So like 4 years, 5 years, something like that. That's how they make decisions. And they make decisions for a whole society. In comparison to that, there are quite a few of Native American cultures that actively spoke of and considered in their decisions the effects upon the 7th generation to come. So if I make a decision today, I have to think, what will the 7th generation after me, how will that generation be affected by my decision today? That is expanding time horizons extremely. Also interesting, expanding thought horizons. You might be, okay, Stefano, I pick you because you mentioned you're from Wuppertal Institute. I'm just assuming without asking, you might study something in the sustainability realm. So you might be an expert in a field there. What are you studying?
I'm dealing with post-growth, degrowth.
Post-growth, degrowth. You're an economist, someone could say.
Yes.
If I ask you to expand your thought horizons, I ask you to think like a chemist, think like a psychologist, think like a farmer, think like a fish in the sea. Expand your thought horizons can also mean, or think like a gardener. All of those different ways or different perspectives are important if you really want to understand a system. If you only look at a system from your standpoint, from your education, from what you already know, you miss out a lot on the information that would be available. And then I think one of my favorite parts of this list is number 13, celebrate complexity. This is really a takeaway I hope all of you can have with you. The universe is complex, it's messy, it's non-linear, turbulent, chaotic. If you have been in love at some point in your life, you understand very well what that means and why this is so messy. And it's not only in love, it's everywhere. Human behavior, ecosystems, all of that is not mathematical, neat equilibria. If I give you a box of chocolate, then you will love me in return for that. That doesn't work. It's not like that. It's not that easy. Universe is complex. It's messy. It self-organizes and it evolves. And that is so nice. And that's so cool because it's interesting. It's fun. And I really love the fact that sometimes I do something and what I expect to happen simply doesn't work out. I have a dog, I have a puppy. He's 4 months old and he has to pee. That is how a system should work. So he drinks water and he has to pee. And I know that. So every 2 hours I try to go out with him. But sometimes he just doesn't want to pee while I'm out, what I'm expecting him to do. But then 5 minutes after I'm back in, he pees on the floor. I'm like, what the fuck? That's not the deal. I took you out in the garden, in some green space where you could pee, but it doesn't work like that. And it's messy. And he's only 4 months old, so he has to learn that, and it takes time, and he does that correctly for 2 weeks, and then suddenly he starts peeing inside again. And I'm like, huh? That doesn't make any sense. But I want to be mad about you. That's just how things are. The whole list, to come back to that, is big and it's too much to understand in a few minutes. So I'm gonna link a corresponding article to that in this chat in a few seconds. I also just saw that there were some questions in the chat, maybe. Okay. But a few takeaways that I believe you should have, and after that we will have time for some questions. You are a systems thinker. That's for sure. You already think in systems. You might just not be aware of it. System thinking looks at flows and relationships, like the water flow that I showed at the beginning. You decide where to draw the boundaries based on the needs of the system or the needs of a discussion. Do I count Michael's breakfast in when I think about Argentine politics? Maybe yes, but most probably not. And systems thinkers, they look under the surface to find patterns, structures, and mental models. And the deeper we look down of this iceberg, the deeper we go, and the better we try to understand it, the higher chance we have to make actually an impact on a system, to be able and to also make that impact not have a negative outcome, but rather create something positive, something that we want to intentionally do. That's it from me from at this point. I'm happy to have a little Q&A, but more of actually, I'm not just giving answers. We have time to discuss a few questions. As I said, I'm part of Oikos International. This is really about empowering youth and empowering youth to become change agents, people who can actually change systems.
So thank you very much, Michael. So we have an open floor for Q&A, comments. Just please unmute yourself. We're eager to hear you.
I can start. I have a question. Like, I really like when you say that we have to deal with complexity, and above all, we have to accept it. I think this one is really the first like step. My question is about like I'm carrying out like my PhD about like post growth. For people who doesn't know, post growth are like the approach who try to go beyond the concept of economic growth. So the goal of the economy, it's not just to increase the GDP, but it's also like to bring the well-being, let's say, to people. And in my PhD, I have to support the policymaker to understand, first of all, like post-growth, but also to design some kind of like a framework. And the question is, because I'm dealing at like a city level, okay? So when we are in a city, for you, first, how can be at the entry point to speak with everyone in the city about the systemic change, but also how do you see in the city the role of policymaker, citizen, entrepreneur, like how to start to raise awareness on this, like the first, maybe the first steps that we should do.
Okay, so you want to have an impact on the city system, and you already mentioned like entrepreneurs, politicians, maybe civil society. First step, it's really going back to the list I just shared, get a beat. So would I ask you, how is the system functioning at the moment? How is it running? What's happening there? And maybe you already have some thoughts about it. If you try starting to understand that, then you can go deeper. Why is it like that? Why do these people interact in a certain way? What might be an element to consider, like think like a politician. Okay, yeah, certain things are in 5-year terms because we elect our mayor in 5-year terms. But what influence maybe have families that live in that city on the system, and how many kids they have and where do they live? So understanding this, does it make sense to you? Is that helpful at all? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to focus like on get the vibes and understand the why. I mean, I don't know if we take an example, because now we are dealing a lot with like, okay, the policymaker and the industries, no? So why industry they want to consume, like they want to pursue always like the profit, you know? The why is that because if it's not like they are not competitive in the market, or why like they have to like buy low, they have to like give profit and like and like dividends to the shareholders, no? So that's the why, like buy low, they have to do like this. So like how to change it, and maybe I don't know, like how to enable people to change also this like mindset. So maybe education, so like mindset, but also if you give like people the economic security, you know, to choose where go to work and to have a purpose. Also the entrepreneur in this case, it can change, because the why that's like different, that's complex I think, but just to get you, I think the why it can be really an interesting entry point to question why the people do that.
There's I think it's from a Japanese industry innovator. I forgot his name. He was also the one who invented lean industries. He said, ask why 5 times. That's not only asking why once. Why do they interact like that? Then ask why again. So why do they do that? And then ask again, why do they do that? So really dive into it rather than sticking with the answer you might get from the first why. And do all of that before you go into the how and the what.
We have a raised hand from Motilia, and then we should move for the next phase.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Just quickly, I'm Utilia and I'm from Denmark. And thank you first of all for the presentation. It was super interesting to, I guess, like hear a bit more about, I guess, the theory behind systems thinking. So I've mostly talked about it a lot with Matthias. So yeah, just thank you for sharing all that. I have a question, and I think it's where I am in a lot of both my research when I study and just like my activism work is how we, I know you said in one part of it, like move beyond the quantifiable, like accept the fact that the system is complex. But an issue that I often find is like whether what I do is actually having an impact, or what impact in that case, or like how long will it last? Will it only be, you know, a short-term impact? And I know you can't fully map or identify all the impacts in a complex system, but I was just wondering if there is any framework or if there is any sort of idea or understanding of how you map the impact of, for instance, changing the system. And I know it's a very broad question, but
Mm, Measuring the impact of changing system. It's a big topic, especially in the whole activism world, where it's so often about, yeah, going beyond the quantifiable. Um, and I think there is no good solution to that. So like well-being economies are one idea to go away from just numbers. But you mentioned something, and that might be interesting to you to dive into, which is maybe measuring complexity. So how complex is a system? And because you mentioned, okay, do my actions actually have an impact here? And that connection, I would recommend you looking for the Kinefin. I type how it's written in the chat
yeah.
system. It's a model that helps understanding the complexity of a system, the complexity of how something works. Maybe that helps you a little bit. But as I said, it's just a starter here.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
We have one more raised hand from Nordala. I don't know if you want to go really quickly.
Okay, thank you, Matthias. Good to see you. And thank you so much for the exciting presentation. So I don't know if you've had this question before, Michael, but my question is around, I have a journalistic background and I'm a comms person. So for me, I think it goes down to communicating systems thinking or systems shift for the ordinary person to hear. By the way, I'm from Zimbabwe. I didn't mention that. For the ordinary person to understand, because my aim is to make this a topic or a subject that is understood by everybody, not for it to seem like it's a topic for a certain group of people or an elitist sort of like topic, but for it to be understood by everyone else. I know that I may want to communicate system thinking in my local language, but obviously there are certain words that my local language cannot sort of like translate from the English version. But before I get into the whole picture of using local languages, like maybe from a general comms perspective, maybe using social media, how would you say is the best way to simplify a system shift for any person to understand? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I guess there are tons of ways to do that. My approach would be trying to find an example that is tangible for the people you're talking, like the people in Zimbabwe. Example that I heard in the past, which was part of a workshop, was around penicillin, so antibiotics, and trying to figure out and then letting people think about it. The most energizing, the most interactive way or most influential way to make people think about systems is to actually let them think about systems. So asking the question, okay, the invention of penicillin in 1911, I believe, somewhere like that. What kind of effects did that have? Which stakeholders, which groups were affected by that? Making a game of that. And very quickly, everyone who knows a little bit about antibiotics, and even the people who don't know, if they are in a group, you can talk. You can figure out, yeah, this has an impact here on health and on the food industry and on monetary systems and on everything in your daily life. So you let them create these systemic maps. I think that's the most influential way. How to translate that into social media, I don't know.
Thank you so much. I like that example because it's relatable. It's something that someone can say, "Oh yeah, I like that." Thanks. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, let's please, Anania, if you could do really quickly your question, and then we'll move on to the next phase.
So my question is a little bit similar to mind mapping that we used to do. I think a little bit simpler version. So I was wondering, like, it is similar to mind mapping also? I mean, is it mind mapping is a part of system thinking?
It can be. That depends on how you create your mind map. I think the important term here is looking at the flows and relationships rather than at the parts that you have in the mind map. So and also making sure that just because you have something on a mind map, it's not a representation of the whole system. It's a mental model, it's one perspective that you have on it, and there might be so much more that you don't consider at this moment. So it can be part of a process, but it's usually only something for starters to start understanding how things relate with one another. And I will also just add my mail in the chat. Please feel always free to reach out if you have any further question. This is the resource I wanted to share with you, Dancing with Systems from Donella Meadows. And please also just look around on this website. You will find tons of more information there. And yeah, also once again, thank you all for listening, for asking some questions here. And thank you, Matthias, for giving me the stage here. I hope that you can take away something and so that you will be systems changes with big impact in the future and already in the now.
Thank you, Michael, for staying with us. Thank you for your time. This has been amazing, and we certainly hope to see you more along this process.